What's going on, guys? Tobin here with you. Thanks for checking us on out. You're beautiful, and I love you. Tough loss for the Miami Heat tonight as they fall to the Toronto Raptors, 112-104. Very, very weird game. I mean, there's a look. The Heat had some built-in excuses tonight, as did the Raptors. A very banged-up version of both teams. The Miami Heat coming into this one, we found out in the middle of the day, no Bam Adebayo. We found out yesterday that Tyler Hero was not traveling to Toronto or was not initially on the road trip, which is definitely concerning when it comes to Boy Wonder and what's going on with his ankle there. But on the other side of it, I'm sure Toronto could tell you that they did not have Pascal Siakam. He was out. Gary Trent Jr. is out. Precious Achiuwa is out. So they had plenty of guys that were banged up as well. I think the thing with Toronto, the one, I'm not just on a version of themselves, they feel like a team that is just filled with more 6'9" to 7'1" guys with pterodactyl wingspan. It's funny, like you go and watch teams warm up and you get to do this, which is one of the cool things about the gig when your boots on the ground. And you see certain themes on certain teams, and you certainly look and you go to Toronto and you're just like, Jesus, like there's more guys who are just, who are just tarantulas out there that just have all this size and span that you had to deal with. And so, what the plus minus numbers are without Bam. When we found out that he was going to be out tonight, it definitely was like, my initial reaction, we found out during the show today, and the initial reaction I was, all right, I don't even know where you're going to go. And we found out the initial go of it was they were going to go with Nikola Jovic, which was cool. I mean, you got to see him get his first NBA start and see him in action there with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. Got off to a really, really fantastic start to this game, and I don't really think you could have asked anything more from the rookie to come in there and feel comfortable with the role that he was put in. I thought that for him, he showed a lot of positive stuff, and especially I think just that comfortability of moving around and moving with. I really would like to see him get some more time in this rotation. I do think it's important that Nikola is not spending the year on his ass cheeks and not developing at all. I know that with the Heat, typically it's a slower roll. I know that they're looking at him very much as this project and this guy who is going to be, they see he's not even in their weightlifting program yet. They look at him as a 19-year-old who hasn't even graduated high school. But I do think, sitting down with him at media day and getting a chance to speak with him, I do think he's a very confident kid. That this isn't like the same as it used to be with bringing over international players. This is a league that's really been, in a lot of ways, taken over at the top by international players. You think about, look at I think the top 5 on ESPN's top 100, even though that's kind of a garbage rating in some areas, but I think 4 out of the 5 between Luka and Jokic and Giannis and Joel Embiid, these are not American-born players. Joel was a college player over here, so maybe you don't count him quite the same as the others, but these are guys who were dominating in the overseas and kicking ass, and now have turned into the monsters. I just don't think that it's looked upon as daunting as it used to be for international guys. And I talked to Nikola about that in the interview. That if you guys haven't seen it, I'll link it in the description so you guys can check it on out. But he is a guy who's still very much learning the game too. Like there was a moment in the last game that I was at against the Suns where Caron Butler is still teaching him certain NBA moves and how to take advantage. So there's a lot of crafting that has to go on with that young man. That being said, I think you see that he is a natural scorer, that he is comfortable with the ball in his hands. Certainly at a guy of his size, you would like a little bit more rebounding. That's, I think, what the Heat were probably looking for tonight, and that really was the story of this game, where things swung and why the Miami Heat had themselves an 11-point lead at one point in the third quarter, and it just all collapsed on them. And this is a game where it's like, you look at it and you look at the numbers of Miami, and 112 points in today's NBA, that's not awful. You saw Miami, they shot 55% from the field. Pretty good. They shot 37% from downtown. Not too shabby. Got to the line 22 times. Like, if you were to look at Miami's game, you're like, you know what? If I just looked at their side of the box score, you're like, it's a pretty decent way to consider Bam's out, Tyler's out. It was a put forth in some spots a winnable performance, but then you go and you look at the rebound column. And the Heat got out-rebounded by 20, 42-23. The Heat gave up 16. Toronto grabbed 16 offensive rebounds. They shot the ball 20 more times, 86-66. The free throw attempts were the same. And, that was really the story of the game. OG Anunoby was an absolute beast tonight. 32 points, 10 rebounds for them. They got nice performance from Fred VanVleet. Scotty Barnes was doing his thing. And then on Miami's end, nobody really had that takeover moment. And I think they definitely could have used it. Gabe Vincent really did a valiant effort because there was a 21-0 run in the third quarter where they just one of those ruts where Miami just couldn't buy a bucket at all. Gabe had some clutch shots, and he and Dwayne Dedmon honestly kept it afloat for them, which is, not a sentence you think you're going to hear a lot during the season. And I think for Miami, if you're looking at any part of this game, I think you probably look to Jimmy, and nobody doubts his greatness. I'm one of the biggest Jimmy Butler guys out there, but these are the kind of types of nights where, the narrative of why he's maybe not put him in the upper echelon of like superstars, even though this is regular season bull bleep, game 6-15. On a night tonight where you don't have Bam, you don't have Tyler, you kind of need what Jimmy tapped into in that Hornets game, right? Where it's like, I need that takeover, and I need more than 8 shots from Jimmy Butler. I need Jimmy Butler to put it up a little bit more. And he puts up 8 shots, 2 of them are from downtown, like gives you 13 points, and he's just like, you just need, you would hope that Jimmy could have stepped on the gas a little bit earlier and could have gotten you just a little bit more. And it just felt like maybe he was biding his time for that fourth quarter run because, he was literally the biggest guy out there on the team in the closing minutes of this game. And Jimmy is 6'8", like he's a bulldog. Don't get me wrong. He's built like a brick house. And he's strong, but hell, like you're asking him to go at it with all these big dudes on Toronto. Not to sound like Monty was. It definitely was I felt like the ghost of Monty Williams was hanging over this game with some of the calls. I felt like it wasn't even the free throws, because the free throws were even on this one. But like the turnovers for Miami were pretty wild. They had 23 turnovers, but it was like they were doing this thing. And remember in the Golden State game where they kept calling Jordan Poole for carrying? This was like, so you're like, all right, I guess even Tyler Hero said, I guess you can call that. I mean, they can call that basically on everyone that they want to. There's some very big point of emphasis things that are trying to go on in the NBA. Some people like it. I do think the players have to get used to it. We know they got rid of the take foul. We know that screening has been a big point of emphasis. A lot of people are wondering if that's going to affect Bam Adebayo, because of a lot of players say he's an illegal screener, even though he's an elite screener. It's kind of that thing of like guys who take charges. Are they floppers? Guys who are screeners, do they do it legally? There's that line that they got to adjust to. Tonight, it was like you had the strictest pivot foot refs in the world. They were calling turnovers. They were calling travels willy-nilly. And then the crazy thing was, like, there was one possession where Jimmy looked like he was doing a great job on Anunoby. I thought he got him to travel twice, and they didn't call it. And the Heat bench was freaking out, and he ends up getting a bucket. There were a couple, like, Max Strus had a block, ended up in Raptors' hands. They put it, so there were some tough breaks too for Miami. This is one of those games where it's frustrating. It's not one of those ones I want to chalk up and say, didn't have Bam, didn't have Tyler, who cares? Because this is not the version of the Miami Heat, but because they didn't have their best version either. But it's also not a game I think you can read a lot into, because this isn't, the best version of the Miami Heat. But I do think that, look, tonight fans will probably look at this and say, well, okay, when you have a roster you constructed with no true power forwards, and we're seriously looking at a situation where Udonis Haslem wasn't on the trip for personal reasons, you're like, gee, we could have maybe used some UD minutes. And like, I understand in his 20th year, you're probably not thinking to yourself, we could use some UD minutes, but no Omer going under the knife, Bam out, and UD out. now you're relying on a 19-year-old to go out there and try and give you stuff. You're giving Dwayne Dedmon, who is, a spark plug guy. You're still, even in tonight's situation, he's still only playing 16 minutes, and is also playing on a banged up foot. And so, like, who then are you relying on? Orlando Robinson. So these are the types of games. It's not a reflection on your team, because this is not the version of the Miami Heat, but also we kind of knew this going into this road trip. This was going to be a very interesting trip for a team in Miami that is small, going up against Toronto, going up against Cleveland, going up against Minnesota. What is this going to look like? And especially when you don't have Bam Adebayo out there, it is going to be a tough go. And I will say, I thought Miami had an opportunity to get this one tonight. And they shot themselves in the foot in a lot of spots, not just on the rebounding. I think the turnovers was probably the bigger deal in that regard, because you were going to get smacked up and down around the glass, and you did, and that was demoralizing in a lot of ways, especially when it felt like there were a lot of positions they played good defense and worked hard, and a ball would still just fall into a Raptors hand. But if they could have cleaned that up, I would say outside of that, the only thing I could really look at and say, like, in a game like this, where you're kind of shrinking buckets, and especially I think in that third quarter where it really just got away from them, like Kyle and Jimmy, them combining for 17 shots, it's like one of those guys has to take 17 shots by himself, and those guys, especially in the regular season, are share the wealth kind of guys and get everybody else involved. You got nothing from Duncan Robinson. He gave you a goose egg in 15 minutes. Got one of those typical, he was near somebody and the ref just called a foul. So Jamal Cain didn't get it. There was at one point in the 21-0 run that Toronto was on, like 3 straight shots went to Jamal Cain, who I really liked and I thought looked, great in preseason, but like they were just like forcing Jamal Cain to get the ball. Toronto did a great job of getting the ball into his hands because the Heat were looking for the clean look, and they're like, yes, let's give it to the two-way guy. And I think that anytime Jimmy Butler's not imposing his will and teams do get him into that cruise mode, they are thankful that he is not putting his head down and getting to the line a crap load of times. So, not like the most painful loss of the year, but certainly some frustration that came with it, and they got to get right. This is a trip where, especially if you're banged up, you'd really probably kill to come home with an even record, especially if Bam's not going to play. But this is not going to be an easy one. If he's not able to play and he's not able to give you all the games in this trip or all the rest of the way, and Tyler not traveling with you, you got to they're going to have to do some really quirky, unorthodox stuff, and maybe we'll see some great blossoming from Jović. I thought we're all thrilled with the first quarter that he played in this game. Confident young man, and it'll be cool to see if he can give him even more.